in this case the UAP one, to hide another narrative, the reality of what's going on. And they say, yeah, he's absolutely the real deal. These were the senior people in the Ministry of Defense with responsibility for nuclear issues. It specifically uses the phrase UAP radiation.
Right.
I mean, UAP radiation stated in this highly classified intelligence assessment as if it is an absolute tangible thing that everyone knows about. UAP radiation. Yeah, that's a thing.
Now, let me play devil's advocate there. Perhaps even though this is far in the past, there's some sort of intelligence angle to try to cover up intel as to what could have been happening at those bases that they don't want foreign adversaries to know about. So they say, oh, it was this UAP, as opposed to, oh, it was the whole nuke system we got going on there.
And absolutely, this is always, to my mind, the most credible of the skeptical theories about a lot of this, that
Yes.
we are dealing with an intelligence operation, or call it maybe a counterintelligence operation, to promote a certain narrative, in this case the UAP one, to hide another narrative, the reality of what's going on. And we have some good historical examples of this. For example, with the U-2 spy plane and the SR-71
Gary
Blackbird.
Powers.
Yeah, and we know that on occasion commercial airline pilots would see these things, and of course it suited the CIA and the US Air Force if those stories were then written up not as a surprised pilot caught a glimpse of America's latest spy plane, but a pilot seen a flying saucer. So there is historical precedent for the government sometimes, if not, well, I'll say actively promoting a UAP narrative to hide the reality of what it was, to throw an adversary off the trail. Now, I think what we're dealing with currently in Congress and NASA and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and everything, I think it goes too far for that to be the explanation, or at least for it to be a definitive explanation for everything.
Yeah, and that's where it gets interesting. I was on the phone with Jesse Michaels, who has, I think the channel used to be known as American Alchemy, but now it's known as Jesse Michaels on YouTube. I was on the phone with him last night for a while, and he knew David Grush, who's, for people out there who haven't followed this, is the whistleblower who came forward this year in America. He knew David Grush, I think, for a couple years before that happened. And I was asking him about, now, again, this is one guy's opinion here, but I was asking him about the angle that possibly Grush is completely telling the truth, but that the colonels on the trail were kind of left there for him specifically to do that as some sort of intel operation. And one of the arguments that Jesse made, that he made a lot more eloquently than I'm going to sum it up right now, was that the number of bases that would have to be covered for that to be the case is at a ridiculous amount. Like there's too much there for him to have totally been looking at fake stuff and not having the truthful outcome on at least something there.
Yes, I can say, I mean, I don't think it's definitive, because of course it's always possible that, this is an incredibly complex and multifaceted deception operation, and he has himself been deceived. I think it's more likely there's a variant of that theory where he's a willing participant in an intelligence operation to falsely promote this narrative for some reason or the other, maybe to hide something else, but maybe there's another reason. I mean, just to cover up the fact that it's a new spy plane seems to be going a little bit far, so maybe it's something else, but I can't rule out the possibility that all of this is a deception operation, possibly with Grush himself as a victim or one of the victims of that, but more likely, as you say, perhaps because of the difficulties of that and the complexities, more likely, if that's true, he's a deliberate part of it. And in any of these situations, he's obviously being a patriot, and so I know at least two people who know Dave Grush quite well. I've not met him, but I know at least two people with verifiable backgrounds in all this who know him, well enough to be on sort of friendly first name terms. Not now that he's out, but before that when he was in the system. And they say, yeah, he's absolutely the real deal. Did what he said he did. Absolutely, he was part of the UAP task force. So
now he says though that he saw evidence, and I don't want to misremember some things. So I don't want to go too far with this, but he talks about that 33 crash in Italy and how there were craft recovered. He also then in his testimony went into how the U.S. government is in possession of biological entities not of this earth. I can't remember though if he said he claimed to have physically seen it.
I don't think so.
It was just he may have seen pictures of it though.
He said that he has interviewed about 40 people in the, I don't know whether they're all in the intelligence community, but military intelligence. He's interviewed about 40 people, I believe, with apparently direct knowledge of some of these programs. And these programs seem to split into two main categories. A legacy program looking at crash retrievals and a legacy program looking at reverse engineering, presumably of the materials recovered. So I don't think Dave Grush claims to have seen any of this himself. But I use an analogy about that, which might be quite helpful here. When I was working for the Ministry of Defense in headquarters building, one of the divisions was called something like D-Nuke Pol Sci, and that was Directorate of Nuclear Policy and Security.
Gotcha.
These were the senior people in the Ministry of Defense with responsibility for nuclear issues. I never asked them, of course, but my common sense and my knowledge of the system tells me few, if any, of those people have probably ever touched the side of a ballistic nuclear missile. Mm-hmm. That's something the engineers do.
I understand.
And these are the policy people. So when Dave Grush says, "Well, I haven't seen any of this myself," and people go, "Oh, I say, so what?" He's a policy guy, an analyst, and I wouldn't expect him necessarily to have hands-on any more than I would expect those policy people in Ministry of Defense main building to have touched a bomb.
I'm not saying your argument's wrong. I think that actually makes a lot of sense. The devil's advocate there is we know nukes exist. We know bombs exist. It's human made, right? So there might be a part like, seen one nuke, seen them all. Don't have to go down there and actually touch it or whatever. But I got to tell you, man, if I were in charge of an alien desk, like some people in this room, I'd want to go down there and touch that fucking thing.
I would too. Oh, one time I played a great joke on a colleague. I mean, I'm just doing this for color, but it illustrates that you're right, that of course human nature as you'd want to know. I think it was not the next but one job I had after the UFO job. I went into security, and we got talking one day about biometric security, and I said, "Oh yeah," one time I went to the US, and I was completely making this up, but I just thought I'd have some fun with the moment because there'd just been an advertisement published. This was the early 90s. This tech was really not in the public domain, but there was a retinal identification security system advertised in a sort of security industry trade magazine. And it was a great advert. I remember it to this day. It said something like, "I looked deeply into her eyes, and she said, 'Access denied.'" and it was all about these retinal scans, which were just coming in at the time. And I said to the guy, "Oh, there's nothing." I said, one time I said, I went to the Pentagon. I said, and they had the wreckage of the Roswell crash down there. And I said, they gave me the retinal scan, they gave me the palm scan, I had a thing, and and I was like, all that. And as I was leaving, the guy says, Nick, he says, I gotta know, what does the craft look like? And of course, I was just kind of having some fun with him. But yeah, of course, you'd want to know. You'd want to get your hands on that craft in a way that you wouldn't say, hey, I want to touch a nuke. In fact, I would be definitely, I don't want to touch a nuke for obvious reasons. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to go anywhere near them.
Yeah, I know they exist.
I know
so
they're shielded,
but
even so, I don't want to. Why would I?
But there's also like, is there a danger in touching a craft from a foreign universe or galaxy? Sorry, that you don't know what kind of tech it is. It could be way worse than a nuke too. That's a question.
Which is why Jim Peniston, the moment he touched the side of the Rendlesham thing, had his kind of "oops, I shouldn't have done that" moment. And it's why, with the phrase UAP radiation being put into intelligence assessments, it tells you it's a thing, and it says, I would be very cautious.